1. SpongeBob is on drugs. SpongeBob lives in a pineapple, works for pocket change, and once watched his own hands melt off his body without losing his smile. So the question isn't really whether something is wrong with SpongeBob's world. The question is whether it was always supposed to be that way. The drug theory started as a joke on early internet forums around 2007, but it gained serious traction because the evidence is genuinely hard to dismiss. The show's visual logic doesn't follow underwater physics. It doesn't follow any physics. Objects materialize and disappear. Characters shrink and grow between scenes. Reality itself bends around SpongeBob's emotional state. When he's happy, flowers bloom from concrete. When he's frightened, his eyes literally detach from his body and run away. The geography doesn't help. Bikini Bottom sits beneath Bikini Atoll, a place irradiated by decades of nuclear testing. The entire ecosystem is chemically compromised. But beyond that, SpongeBob specifically shows symptoms consistent with dissociative episodes, extreme emotional swings, inability to connect actions to consequences, and a detachment from physical reality that even other characters find alarming. Creator Steven Hillenburg always denied any intentional drug subtext and pointed to surrealist animation traditions as his influence. That's a reasonable explanation. But surrealism in animation usually has internal rules. SpongeBob's world doesn't. It has moods, and the mood changes based entirely on what SpongeBob is feeling in a given moment, which is either brilliant character-driven storytelling or something far more chemical. 2. The Krabby Patty secret formula contains crab. This one is uncomfortable to sit with, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. Mr. Krabs is the only crab in Bikini Bottom. Not one of a few, the only one. Background characters cycle through the same fish designs constantly, but no other crab ever appears as a resident of the community. The formula that built his entire empire is so valuable, he has dedicated his life to protecting it, gone to war over it, and chosen it over his own daughter multiple times. And he has never, not once, told anyone what is actually in it. The theory proposes the secret formula contains crab meat, which is why Mr. Krabs cannot allow it to be known, why no other crabs exist in Bikini Bottom, and why the patties are so uniquely addictive. Plankton, who has spent decades trying to steal the formula, is technically Mr. Krabs' oldest friend. Some versions of the theory suggest he already knows the truth, and his obsession with the formula is actually an attempt to expose it. The show does nothing to disprove this. It actively avoids showing the formula's contents across hundreds of episodes and multiple films. Nickelodeon has never issued any statement clarifying what the formula contains. The ingredient remains one of the most protected secrets in animation history, which, for a children's cartoon about a fry cook, seems like a strange amount of institutional silence. 3. Every character represents a mental illness. The character lineup of SpongeBob SquarePants maps almost perfectly onto a DSM diagnostic chart, and the overlap is too precise to be entirely coincidental. SpongeBob himself displays textbook ADHD, impulsive, emotionally dysregulated, incapable of focusing on tasks outside his areas of hyperfixation, and deeply sensitive to perceived rejection despite appearing relentlessly cheerful. Patrick shows characteristics consistent with an intellectual disability, but also surprising moments of emotional intelligence that complicate a simple reading. Sandy's entire arc involves a scientist voluntarily isolating herself in an alien environment, refusing to go home despite showing increasing signs of psychological strain. That maps remarkably well onto anxiety-driven overachievement and obsessive identity investment in work. Squidward is the most discussed. His presentation, persistent low mood, grandiose self-concept, inability to form genuine connections, chronic frustration with the gap between his self-image and his reality, reads as a portrait of narcissistic personality disorder layered over clinical depression. Mr. Krabs shows obsessive-compulsive patterns specifically centered on money, with the rigidity and anxiety that comes with it. Creator Steven Hillenburg has never confirmed this reading, describing the cast as archetypes rather than diagnoses. But the show aired for years on a children's network while quietly depicting what it actually looks like to live alongside, and sometimes be, people managing these conditions. Whether intentional or emergent, the psychological psychological accuracy is striking. 4. Bikini Bottom is built on a nuclear test site. This is the theory with actual historical documentation behind it, which makes it the most grounded and arguably the most disturbing entry on this list. Bikini Atoll is a real place. It's a small chain of islands in the Marshall Islands, and between 1946 and 1958, the United States government detonated 23 nuclear weapons there as part of Operation Crossroads and Operation Castle. The testing was so extensive that the islands remain contaminated today. Residents were relocated, some forcibly, and the ecosystem was fundamentally altered at a genetic level. Bikini Bottom sits directly beneath this location. That detail is not subtext, it's in the show's name. The fan theory proposes this is the actual explanation for every biological impossibility in the show. The sentient sea life, the mutations producing creatures of impossible size and cognition, the accelerated evolution that allowed underwater civilization to develop, all of it traces back to decades of radiation exposure altering marine genetics in the blast zone. It also explains something the show never addresses directly: why there are no humans. The nuclear tests, combined with potential sea level changes or an undisclosed disaster, eliminated the surface civilization. The creatures at the bottom evolved into the void. Hillenburg was a marine biologist before becoming an animator, which means he chose this geography deliberately. Whether that choice was a dark joke or a deliberate Easter egg for adults watching alongside their kids remains his. 5. SpongeBob is immortal and knows it. SpongeBob is a sea sponge. Real sea sponges are among the most biologically resilient organisms on Earth. They can be cut apart, and each piece regenerates into a complete animal. The show uses this as a running gag. SpongeBob tears himself in half. He loses his face. He dehydrates into a dry husk and gets rehydrated minutes later with no apparent damage. The theory goes further. It proposes SpongeBob is functionally immortal, that he has been alive far longer than the show implies, and that his relentless optimism is not innocence, but coping. An immortal being watching everyone around him age and die over centuries would need a psychological mechanism to keep functioning. Radical, impenetrable cheerfulness is that mechanism. Evidence fans cite is scattered across the series. In one episode, SpongeBob casually mentions having had the same job for years in a way that doesn't track with his apparent age. In another, his driving test record shows failures dating back further than should be possible. His laugh, which he cannot control and which physically affects the environment around him, has been described by some fans as an autonomic stress response, not genuine happiness. The counter-argument is that SpongeBob is simply written as naive and enthusiastic. That's the cleaner explanation. But the show occasionally lets his mask slip, usually in quiet episodes with no laugh track, where SpongeBob alone at night in his house looks less like a happy child and more like something very old, trying to remember what happiness felt like. 6. Patrick is actually highly intelligent. Patrick Star tests as one of the least intelligent characters in Bikini Bottom, and the show builds his entire identity around stupidity, which makes the exceptions deeply strange. Over the course of the series, Patrick gives genuinely sophisticated advice at unexpected moments. He demonstrates complex social awareness in situations where his established characterization should prevent it. In one episode, he correctly solves a puzzle that stumps multiple other characters. In another, he gives SpongeBob an emotionally nuanced response to grief that reflects real psychological understanding. These aren't soft contradictions, they're jarring departures from his consistent presentation. The theory proposes Patrick is performing stupidity deliberately. The motivation varies by version. Some fans suggest Patrick discovered early that being considered stupid meant nobody expected anything from him, freeing him from responsibility and social obligation. Others argue Patrick has a traumatic history that makes cognitive disengagement a survival mechanism. The most elaborate version suggests Patrick is the most self-aware character in the show, someone who watched the social dynamics of Bikini Bottom and calculated that the easiest life was the one with the lowest expectations. The show never confirms this, and the simpler explanation, inconsistent writing over 14 seasons, probably accounts for most of the contradictions. But the theory gained renewed traction with the Patrick Star Show, where Patrick's family dynamics and household environment suggest a background far more complex than a rock on the seafloor implies. 7. Sandy is psychologically deteriorating. Sandy Cheeks left Texas to conduct marine biology research in Bikini Bottom, and at the time of the show's beginning, she's operating as a credentialed scientist living voluntarily in a sealed biodome at the bottom of the ocean. That is not a normal work environment. The theory argues it's taking a measurable toll. In early seasons, Sandy is competent, grounded, and serves as the most functionally rational character in the main cast. She corrects scientific misinformation, maintains physical discipline, and demonstrates clear professional purpose. By later seasons, those qualities erode. Her experiments become increasingly reckless. Her judgment deteriorates. She destroys Bikini Bottom accidentally with enough frequency that it stops reading as comedy and starts reading as a pattern. The isolation math is straightforward. Sandy lives in a pressurized dome, cannot step outside without a water suit, and maintains relationships primarily with people who don't share her species, cognitive framework, or cultural context. She's surrounded by reminders that she doesn't belong in the environment she chose. Her homesickness episodes, where she goes into hibernation or nearly leaves permanently, suggest someone managing a genuine psychological crisis through willpower rather than resolution. The show treats Sandy's competence as a constant, but the evidence across seasons suggests someone slowly losing the stability she started with. She came to study marine life and ended up as part of the exhibit. Whether she'll ever acknowledge that is a question 14 seasons have carefully avoided answering. 8. SpongeBob's world is post-apocalyptic. The most persistent world-building question in SpongeBob is one the show never directly addresses. Where did all the humans go? Bikini Bottom is littered with human artifacts, anchors, boats, lawn furniture, entire buildings constructed in architectural styles that reflect surface civilization. These aren't fossils, they're in active use. The residents of Bikini Bottom drive boats as cars, use human tools, and occupy human structures that sank to the seafloor at some point after their construction. The infrastructure of a surface civilization is everywhere, repurposed by creatures that evolved fast enough to use it. The theory proposes humanity collapsed. The specific cause varies: nuclear war, climate catastrophe, pandemic, or simply the same nuclear testing at Bikini Atoll that the location theory addresses. Whatever happened, it happened fast enough that equipment and buildings sank intact rather than decaying before submersion. The sea creatures that moved into the resulting underwater environment inherited human materials alongside the ecological niche humans vacated. This reframes the entire show. SpongeBob isn't a whimsical fantasy. It's a nature documentary set 10,000 years after civilization's end, filtered through the sensibility of creatures who never knew what they inherited. The boats they drive were built for a species that no longer exists. The anchors decorating their homes are the tombstones of a drowned world. The show never says any of this, but it also never offers an alternative explanation for why a sponge uses a spatula. 9. Squidward is the show's true protagonist. Every episode's structure in SpongeBob follows the same basic architecture. SpongeBob wants something, pursues it with infectious enthusiasm, and Squidward suffers as a direct result. The show frames this as comedy. The theory argues it's tragedy, and Squidward is the character the show is actually about. Squidward Tentacles is a trained musician and visual artist living in a community that doesn't value or understand either discipline. He has genuine skill. This is confirmed multiple times across the series, but he lacks the social warmth, the financial resources, or the industry connections to translate that skill into the recognition he needs to sustain his sense of self. He watches SpongeBob, a character with a fraction of his ability, receive love and community effortlessly simply by being enthusiastic and kind. The gap between what Squidward deserves and what SpongeBob has is the engine of his bitterness. The theory gained academic attention when psychologists pointed out that Squidward's presentation maps onto real experiences of talented people living in environments that cannot appreciate them. His suffering is not exaggerated for effect. It's structurally accurate to a specific kind of thwarted ambition. SpongeBob isn't his neighbor. He's the universe's answer to every time Squidward asked why his gifts weren't enough. Hillenburg was asked about about Squidward's apparent unhappiness in a 2002 interview and said he found the character deeply sympathetic. He didn't say Squidward was wrong to feel the way he does. That's either a writer talking about a character or a creator quietly acknowledging that the show has a second story running beneath the one children watch. 10. Mrs. Puff is running a scam. Mrs. Puff has failed SpongeBob's driving test more times than any official record can track. She has been arrested because of his driving. She has been hospitalized. She has lost her school, rebuilt it, and watched SpongeBob destroy it again. And yet, she keeps him enrolled. The theory proposes this is not patience or professional obligation. It's business. SpongeBob pays tuition each time he enrolls, and in Bikini Bottom's economy, a student who perpetually fails is more valuable than one who passes. Passing SpongeBob ends the revenue stream. Failing him keeps it open indefinitely. The evidence accumulates across seasons. Mrs. Puff consistently finds procedural or technical reasons to fail SpongeBob on tests he arguably passes on technical merit. She resists external pressure to pass him even when it would relieve her personal suffering. In episodes where passing him becomes genuinely possible, she engineers reasons it can't happen. She has had private moments outside SpongeBob's presence where she appears to calculate rather than simply despair. The counter reading is that she genuinely cannot pass someone who is actually dangerous behind the wheel, and her anguish is real. Both readings are consistent with the evidence. What makes the theory compelling is that it reframes Mrs. Puff's suffering as partially self-inflicted. She created this situation and maintains it, and somewhere beneath the frustration, she knows it. 11. Gary is the most intelligent being in Bikini Bottom. Gary the snail communicates exclusively through the word meow. He is classified as SpongeBob's pet. He is fed, walked, and treated as a domesticated animal by every character in the show. The theory proposes this is entirely voluntary. Across the series, Gary demonstrates capabilities that should be impossible for an animal. He has read books from SpongeBob's library that SpongeBob himself cannot understand. He operates complex machinery without instruction. He has solved problems that stumped multiple adult characters simultaneously. In one episode, he speaks full sentences in French. In others, he demonstrates emotional intelligence sophisticated enough to de-escalate situations that would defeat every other character in the cast. The theory argues Gary made a choice. At some point, the most intelligent creature in Bikini Bottom looked at the community around him, assessed the demands and social obligations that came with demonstrated intelligence, and decided the optimal strategy was to be underestimated. He eats when he wants, sleeps where he wants, and periodically saves everyone's lives while receiving zero accountability for anything. His relationship with SpongeBob gives him unconditional love and material security. He gave up recognition in exchange for freedom, and on the evidence, it was a rational trade. No episode has ever definitively disproven this. The French-speaking moment has never been explained in canon. Gary remains the show's most consistent enigma, a creature who knows exactly what is happening and has chosen, very deliberately, to say nothing. 12. The whole show is SpongeBob's dying hallucination. This is where we end, because this is the darkest place the theories go. A real sea sponge has no brain, no central nervous system, and no sensory organs capable of producing experience. It is one of the most primitive multicellular organisms on Earth. It filters water. It attaches to surfaces. It does not think, feel, or perceive. The theory proposes that the SpongeBob we watch is the product of the final electrochemical activity of a simple organism in the moments before cellular death. Everything, Bikini Bottom, Patrick, Sandy, the Krusty Krab, the driving tests, Squidward's clarinet, is a hallucination generated by biology that should be incapable of generating anything. The entire 11-season run is a dying sponge's fraction of a second dream, experienced in whatever passes for consciousness when the threshold is low enough. This makes the show's relentless optimism its most devastating feature. The world SpongeBob imagines for himself is a place where he has friends, purpose, a home, and a job he loves. It's a world where someone like him is celebrated rather than ignored. He invented it from nothing, in the dark, at the bottom of the ocean, without a brain to do it with. It's probably not what Hillenburg intended, but it's hard once you've considered it to watch SpongeBob run to work in the morning sun without feeling something heavier than the show is supposed to make you feel.